Welcome back to another episode of Variety Studio. We are on our fourth show now. Things are just rolling along.
Flying by.
They're flying by. Where we started in our last episode was with Professor of Ethics, Peter Singer, at Princeton University. I want to pick up with him again. Last time he talked about the Syrian refugee crisis. I want to ask him why so many people still believe in religion and the Bible and some of the moral issues that surround America today. Let's hear what he had to say.
Why do you think this is just, in your perspective, why do you think that a vast majority of the world still believes in an ancient book that was 5,000 or 2,000 or 1,500 years old? Why do you think people still accept that as common belief?
So firstly, I'm not so sure that it's a vast majority of the world who believe in sacred text. You look at the population of China, for example, it's not very religious, and that's the largest population in the world. You look at a lot of European countries are not really very religious anymore either. I mean, they may be in some sense, officially Christian, but how seriously do they take it, right? You look at people in Europe who may say that they're Catholics, but they use contraception, they maybe go to church at Easter or Christmas or something like that. They don't take religion very seriously. So I think that there are a very large number of people in the world who are not religious or for whom religion is not an important part of their lives. For the rest, sometimes it's tradition. It's very difficult to behave independently of a tradition. Clearly religion is a kind of psychological prop for some people who are anxious or fearful about the idea of a world in which the life on this world is all there is. You're going to live your 70 or 80 years and that will be the end. And people would like to think that that's not the case. So I think it's a kind of, I would say, an understandable psychological crutch that people have to make it easier to face some of the problems of the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And it seems like a lot of people like in America use like some of like the Bible or some of these other books to support some of these things or work against some of these things like abortion, which I know you're big on, or like same-sex marriage. Can you speak a little bit on that?
Yes. I think that the issues that you mentioned, abortion and same-sex marriage, are issues in which many people are influenced by traditional religious teachings. Not all of them, admittedly. I don't think the issues would completely go away without the religious belief. But in terms of how significant those issues are, clearly they're more significant in conservative or fundamentalist religious communities. And to the extent that a region is less religious, you'll also find less opposition. So, for example, the least religious parts of the United States are the northwest corner of the state of Washington, for example. And you don't find a lot of opposition to same-sex marriage or abortion in Washington or Oregon, places like that. So, and that's true in other countries as well. Where I originally come from, Australia, abortion is not a serious political issue because the two major parties have basically agreed that abortion should remain legal. And Australia is not a very religious country either compared to the United States. So that certainly does make a difference. And I find it odd actually that for Christians in particular that they focus so much on those two issues, where you don't find any discussion in the Gospels about abortion. You don't really find discussion about same-sex relationships either. You do in the Old Testament, but not so much in the Gospels. Whereas what you clearly do find in the Gospels again and again and again is an emphasis on helping the poor. Jesus says to the rich man that if he wants to be perfect, he has to give what he has and sell it and give it to the poor. And yet Christians in this country don't emphasize that. There are plenty of very devout and also very rich Christians who don't see an obligation to sell their goods and give them to the poor. So they're actually going directly against the explicit words of Jesus as reported in the Gospel. And they don't seem to have a problem with that, but they have a problem with women having abortion, which is not something that Jesus ever condemned.
Professor Singer had a lot of interesting things to say about ethics. He's really one of the most renowned professors in the world, so he's really really learned a lot from him. Really had great input. I want to move back on to BizBash. We were talking about that a couple episodes ago. There were a couple of stories that I didn't completely finish telling. So I want to start with one of the stories, which was Drum Cafe. Drum Cafe is a really interesting story, really interesting piece about music. Why don't we check that out? Enter Drum Cafe, an interactive and team-building experience. The idea was conceived in the mid-90s by a man named Warren Lieberman. Head of operations for Drum Cafe New York, Pavel Lempert explains.
Drum Cafe started in the mid-90s with an actual cafe called Drum Cafe. This guy by the name of Warren Lieberman, he, a big drumming enthusiast, although not really a musician by trade, started this cafe where people come and literally just jam and chill out.
With the fall of apartheid, Lieberman found the perfect opportunity to create a new format which would integrate music and culture.
And then with the fall of apartheid, he got together with a bunch of musicians and created this format that was really instrumental in the transitioning of South African society, you know, with a more inclusive element, and because drums being what they are in Africa, it really was really helpful in transitioning the blacks into middle and upper management. It was so successful in South Africa in the mid-90s, it's gone international. We've been here in New York City now for 11 years, and I've been with the company now for 9 years. And our bread and butter is corporate team building, for lack of a better description, but it's really about engagement and really marrying a company's issues or subject matter with the experience, so that the takeaway for the participants resonates more than just another PowerPoint or memo or speaker.
So it seems like you guys were very interactive with the people today at the show. Tell me a little bit how that gets people involved.
Well, one of our big philosophies is the fact that, in essence, everyone has their own individual rhythm, and how we're able to harness individual rhythms together with an alignment to create an overall greater rhythm.
With Pavel's guidance, I decided to give my own individual rhythm a try in an effort to create an overall greater rhythm.
So at some point you do have to feature the individuals and acknowledge the individuals, their efforts, their attributes, and engage them. So in the performance, we just do that literally by coming out to the audience and picking on them and having fun with them. And some rise to the occasion, some have issues, you know, but you just sort of hope that it all works out, and there's always a chance it doesn't, but that's live theater, you know.
So is it hard to play the conga, or can people just pick it up, or how does that work?
Well, the beauty of the drum is most people, they see a drum and they assume they can play it because all you're going to do is hit it. And the drums we use are actually called djembes, not to correct you, but they're West African drums, and because of their shape, they're actually pretty versatile and durable. So that's why we use them, and we use a lot of West African rhythms in our programming. And again, the impulse people have is when they see a drum is I can do this. Yeah. And so, the reason I back myself with amazing musicians is to let the audience feel like they're actually doing something, when it's really the guys on stage who are creating that atmosphere.
That out. So Drum Cafe, definitely a really interesting story, definitely really interesting origins. Pavel Lempert really informed me very well, and definitely check those guys out. Really, really cool stuff. Our last story of BizBash, I want to tell this one too. Wayne Hoffman, he's a mentalist. He's been featured on America's Got Talent, among a lot of other shows, Ellen, to name a few. So yeah, he was really great. I learned a lot from him as well. Why don't we check out to see what mentalist Wayne Hoffman is all about?
Let's get ready to have our Freaks Freak. Please welcome mentalist Wayne Hoffman.
You can not only read your thoughts, but influence them as well. Meet Wayne Hoffman.
It's showtime. You guys ready?
Wayne Hoffman has a gift. He's a magician and illusionist, but he has another trick up his sleeve. He can also read minds. Hoffman was interested in magic as a child, he explains, but he took it to another level when he reached college, where he majored in psychology.
Started my career when well, technically as a child. I got into magic as a hobby, and then I studied psychology in college and realized I could use it for entertainment. So I started integrating psychology into my show, and now I've become a professional mentalist. So basically, I read people's minds for a living.
In case you're wondering how Hoffman reads minds, he'll reveal a few of the patterns he uses.
Yeah, basically a mentalist is a person who reads people's minds, can predict what they're going to do. If you think of something, I can tell you what's on your brain. So it's all based on psychology mixed with a little theater, some hypnotism, and you blend it all together to basically freak people out.
I know a good magician doesn't reveal secrets, but what techniques can you use, or what do you use to like come up with these type of predictions and things?
It's things like, for example, winks, blinks, smiles, breathing patterns, body language reading, interrogation techniques used by the FBI, a little statistics. Like if I said think of a playing card, statistically, most people would think of a high card, like a king, queen, or an ace. Typically, the aces are the most commonly selected, mostly the ace of spades. So knowing these little things and hacks of the human mind, I use it for entertainment.
I asked Hoffman if he could show me one of his simple tricks.
Now, I told you to have a 20. He has no clue what's about to happen.
All right.
I told him to have a $20 bill ready. This is one of the first tricks that I learned how to do. I started traveling a lot all over the place. And if you take a US 20, check this out.
Okay.
Let's say, imagine we go to Canada, and obviously you can't use US there. You just shake the bill, and if you do it, it'll actually turn into a Canadian 20. And it's an okay exchange rate, you know, it's almost, but that's one way. Now you can't spend that here, and you'll probably kill me, so watch this. Don't take your eyes off the bill. You'll get the behind the scenes view. And if you do it, it'll go right back to where it was. So
That's really
neat.
Yeah. Well, if I'm ever in Canada, I can use that. So you may need other currencies to see Hoffman, because in addition to touring in the U.S., you can also see him abroad.
Yeah, I started locally in the Northeast region where I grew up, started expanding into all of the U.S., then the U.S. and Canada, all of North America, and now I've hit 62 different countries all over the world, and I've seen some amazing stuff. So, yeah, it's taken me everywhere.
His talent has also taken him everywhere for TV appearances. Ellen, America's Got Talent, Howard Stern, and Phenomenon are just a few of the shows you can catch Hoffman on.
Yeah, oh, man. Well, it's like, for me, you know, I'm still not over it. When I do a television show, it's like I step inside of my TV. Like when I did Ellen and I'm sitting there in the couch and she's talking and interviewing me, it's like I'm in my TV. I'm like, I'm here in the TV. You know, America's Got Talent was amazing. Obviously, a huge production, awesome. The judges gave me rave reviews and pushed me forward. So all in all, every TV experience that I've done has been great. You know, it's been surreal.
But what is more surreal are the magic tricks Hoffman performs.
This is impossible. You can't get rid of nothing, because the lack of nothing is the presence of something. But if you believe it, it becomes your reality.
For this segment of Variety Studio, we're going to discuss some of the top Simpsons episodes. Being a big Simpsons fan, both of us ourselves, let's run through a couple of them. So I'm going to read my top 10, and then you tell me what I left off, or let's do some discussing. All right, so the first one the 10th one I have on here is 30 Seconds Over Tokyo. It's a little bit newer in consideration. It's like 2000.
I think it's 2002 or something.
2000, I think it was, yeah. So it was kind of coming out right of the prime. It's where they go to Japan, and you remember the episode?
Yeah, the watermelon gag is my favorite. The square watermelon, and they go to eat burgers in Japan. That's pretty funny.
Yeah, that's pretty great. And Homer's like, he gets like arrested, and he's walking through like the paper mache like jail cell. That was pretty funny. And then and then of course Bart, he finds like a lucky fish. Like they have to work at this the fish factory, and they're like cutting the guts and like, you know, in and out, and you know, could have saved the lucky fish. Good stuff. But and then also in that one, then it ends with the, you know, they're on the game show, and then they win the tickets back home, and of course You need a Godzilla reference there at the end.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
So next we have You Only Move Twice. You remember that one?
Of course. Yeah, you know, I should have actually maybe put that one even higher. That's one of my favorite ones because that's the one with Hank Scorpio. Homer gets a new job.
Yeah, I'd say that's around 2 or 3 for me. That's definitely in my top 5.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's classic. You know, he doesn't know he's working for a supervillain. It's like the perfect job.
Scorpion.
They go to the hammock district, right? Yeah, it's funny, and you know, Homer's like in charge. You know, he's like the boss finally. So it's a very funny episode.
Classic.
Yeah. Let's keep moving on here. So the next one I have on the list is the Cartridge Family. That's the one where Homer. It feels insecure or feels unsecure after there's a big soccer riot at the stadium, and then they go purchase a gun. Homer goes purchases a gun,
and he shoots it to turn the lights on and off, and to get Lisa's basketball down from the roof.
right. Very funny. Very funny stuff. And of course, the best scene in that is it's very notable on Hulu. They still have it over there. Is Homer goes into the store and he wants to get a gun like right away, and tells the gun shop owner that he'd kill you if kill him if he didn't have his gun.
I'm mad now. Yeah, I'd kill you if I had my gun. Yeah, well, you don't.
So let's keep moving along. Doing with outlawing things. So Homer versus the 18th Amendment. That is like one of my all-time favorite. Homer versus the Beer Baron.
Oh yes, yeah. That one's great.
Rex Banner.
Rex Banner, yeah.
Rex Banner, classic over there. You know, he's trying to catch the Beer Baron. He gets Flanders, comic book guy, and then of course Homer walks like right past him, undetected.
Yeah.
He's
I love the whole rig they have set up from his house with the bowling balls going into Moe's Tavern, and then it ends up blowing up, and Homer kablamo! To get Marge to not find out about it.
Must have been another one of those beans he had.
Yeah, I rarely like laugh out loud, but that's one that it's so funny.
It's funny. And then of course Barney gets the ball and he's like, "This must be this better be one of the best beers I've ever had." And like, you got lucky on that one. And then moving right along, Homer and Apu. That's an early one, early '90s. That's like really I felt like it set the tone, really set the stage for like The Simpsons and how creative and clever they really would turn out to be. Homer, of course, gets Apu fired from the Quickie Mart after he eats a tarnished hot dog. And he keeps eating the hot dog. Apu offers him like another bucket of like shrimp to make up for like to make up for it.
That's something The Simpsons do so good is music, and one of my favorite songs is in that episode when Who Needs the Quickie Mart song. That's so
classic.
Funny. It's such a great song.
Yeah, Who Needs the Quickie Mart, and you know, of course it's great.
Not me.
Let's hurl up Quickie Mart.
The Quickie Mart is real. Don't.
Not me. Forget the Quickie Mart. Goodbye to Quickie Mart. Who needs a Quickie Mart?
Not me.
And you know, when Homer's eating the Apu's food, like Apu, good me friend, you know, like he's like, you know.
Yeah.
That's a very funny episode.
That'd be on my top 10 as well.
Yeah, it's a good one. Classic for sure. And then Homer the Great. That's the one with the stonecutters.
Of course.
You can't go wrong there. You know,
again, another great song.
Yeah, We Do. You know, it's like, you know, they go through the whole thing, and Homer's the chosen one, and of course he finds his way to get out of that. And another one I didn't put on the list, but it reminds me a little bit of it. The
honorable mention.
Honorable mention, yes. Here's an honorable mention. The Leader, the one with the leader. I forget the exact name of it, but that's a really good one.
Where they parody the Jonestown, the cult.
You're
talking about where they...
Yeah, the cult, and he's like, no.
Yeah.
Batman. Yeah. That's a funny one. That's a good one. Keep moving along here. Let's see, what else do we have? Let's see. Homer the Great, and so we're moving on to One Fish, Two Fish, Red Fish, Blowfish. That's a really good one. That's the one where Homer he eats the poisonous fugu fish.
And he thinks he's gonna die.
Yeah, he thinks he's gonna die. And one of my favorite scenes of like all time in The Simpsons is the where he goes to Dr. Hibbert, and he he goes through like all 5 stages of like acceptance, denial, and like anger and all that, like all in like one
Yeah,
like one
in
motion.
5 seconds. Yeah, it's so funny.
You can expect to go through 5 stages. The first is denial.
No way, because I'm not dying.
Second is anger.
Why, you little...
After that comes fear.
What's after fear? What's after fear?
Bargaining.
Doc, you gotta get me out of this. I'll make it worth your while.
Finally, acceptance.
Well, we all gotta go sometime.
Mr. Simpson, your progress astounds me. I should leave you two alone. Perhaps this pamphlet will be helpful.
Yeah, classic stuff. And then another one I had on there, coming at 3, is Lisa's Pony. That's one of my favorite ones. That's the one where Homer feels bad about letting Lisa down at one of her music recitals, I believe it is, and he goes out and buys her a pony. So he has to pick up like another job at the Quickie Mart. And he's always, he keeps falling asleep on the job, and like he gets like 5 minutes of sleep a night. So that's a really
Yeah, that's an earlier episode, right? Or
yeah, it's like 1991, I think it is. So, that's a classic one. And then continuing with that trend of the early episodes, is Homer at Home at the Bat. That's one of my all-time favorites. Of course, I'm a big baseball fan anyway. But there's, Ken Griffey Jr. got that. Don Mattingly, of course. Don Mattingly,
my favorite.
Mr. Burns, goes up to him. He says, you got to cut those sideburns. Of course, he shaves his whole head, and he still gets in trouble. But he still likes him better than Steinbrenner's.
Mattingly! I thought I told you to trim those sideburns! Go home! You're off the team for good!
Fine. Still like him better than Steinbrenner.
So that's really funny. So yeah, classic stuff over there. And just the fact that Homer gets replaced by Darryl Strawberry, like this great Mets baseball player at the time, and it's just so funny how everyone but Homer's position is like sucked into some like unfortunate like circumstance, like Ozzie Smith fell off the face of the earth, Ken Griffey drank too much like tonic or whatever it was, and so that was very funny.
Yeah, another great episode.
Great episodes. And I think you also had this as your number 1, the Homer They Fall, or if not number 1, up there, right?
I think that's my all-time favorite episode.
Yeah, what did you like about that episode?
It's everything about that is so great. I love when Homer's in the ring with Moe, and he can't even punch, and the fly comes on the bag, and he goes to punch it, and it flies away. Everything about that episode is great. All the commentary with Moe and Larry King and everything is it's so fun.
It was Don King. It was Lucius Sweet.
Lucius Sweet, and Mike Tyson is Dredrick
Tatum. Yeah, of course. Very obvious parody right there, and the Don King reference, Lucius Sweet. It's a very funny line there. Where he's like, they kind of made up. I was watching some of the Simpsons writers, and they really like try to enhance the vocab on that. They use this word, fustigate him. You remember that? Do you remember that? He goes into Lucius Sweet goes into the office, and he says, he's gonna fustigate him.
Oh yeah, I do remember. He goes into the bathroom.
Or no, Moe says it. Yeah. So very, very funny episode there.
There's a line that we talked about the other day. I can't remember. It's like one of the most famous lines that Homer says in that episode.
Well, he goes into the. Well, you might be referring to the one where he goes into the ring and like moments before he like steps in the ring, like someone Tatum had like a heart attack.
A congenital heart defect has apparently felled Tatum moments before he could step into the ring.
Yeah. Dr. Nick, man. He's the worst fight doctor ever.
Yeah, he's fine.
And they got Michael Buffer for that episode, so I mean that was like a really legitimate episode. So yeah, that's my top 10. Any notables that I left off? Maybe the monorail. I didn't mention the monorail. There's so many great episodes. You really can't narrow it down to 10.
It's very hard picking. They constantly change. You watch one day, and then that becomes your favorite episode. And I find that happens with most shows, that they constantly change my favorite episode.
Right. Right. This is as it stands right now. But like you said, I mean, there's so many great episodes that that when Homer's an astronaut, or there's so many.
Yeah, The Shining.
The Shining, right?
So great. That goes along with the Treehouse of Horror.
Right. I want to do a separate one just for those, because Treehouse of Horror is just alone.
We'll do that on its own.
Yeah, because that one could you could go forever. With that. There's so many great episodes because there's so much more versatility you can do with that. You can kill people, and you can do different parodies and all. So
they've done everything.
They've done everything. Yes, they have.
South Park notes that pretty well in one of my favorite South Park episodes.
Yeah.
The Simpsons
We'll,
did it.
we'll have to save that list for next time.
We'll do a South Park
so,
list.
We'll do Family Guy, whatever. We'll do them all. So
I don't know about Family Guy.
No Family Guy. So, all right. Well, that's gonna do it for this segment of Variety Studios TV show talk with Evan and Rob.
Music business today, as Scott Weiland has passed at age 48, lead singer of Stone Temple Pilots. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, well, Scott was a really talented vocalist. I'm a huge fan of it. So today, not really so shocking because he had a history of drug use, as so many of the other grunge groups have. Of course, notoriously Nirvana, Kurt Cobain, who passed at the young age of 27 from heroin addiction. Lane Stanley, who is also another great singer in that grunge era. Really powerful vocalist. He died at age 34 in 2002. So it seems to be a trend here. Now, it's weird because Stone Temple Pilots, so there's usually 4 groups considered in the grunge era, which are typically Nirvana, Pearl Jam, Soundgarden, and Alice in Chains, which is one of my favorite groups. And they're all great groups. I love them all. And it's weird because Stone Temple Pilots always seems to not get enough credit. They were kind of considered grunge, but a lot of people thought that they were ripping off other people's styles, such as the 4 I just named. So it's really kind of, I never thought that they got quite a fair shake, but they made such great music with their 1992 album Core, followed up by their other album Purple. You probably know some of the songs. Plush is a great song. And they were one of the bands at the time. MTV. They used to put on this series, the Unplugged series, which I'm sure you've seen. Where Alice in Chains performed in it.
Eric Clapton was one of the most famous MTV Unplugged.
Yeah. So a lot of those guys did that type of stuff, and more so the '90s, the grunge era was like the Nirvana, Alice in Chains. And STP, they did an unplugged session, the acoustic version, and it was really, it was just great music. And Scott Weiland is, I think, vocally speaking, I think he's up there with one of the most talented ever to sing, especially in that grunge era. I personally really liked Lane Stanley, but Scott Weiland, it was right up there, and he's really going to be missed. He was also in a band. He, of course, had a lot of fallouts with Stone Temple Pilots because of his drug use. After one of the fallouts, he joined another group called Velvet Revolver, which was him and Slash from Guns N' Roses. And together, they really kind of, it's rare that you get a group that also produces, good music after their original group, which was already great. So Velvet Revolver had some really great hits. Fall to Pieces. There's a Slither. So there's really a lot of great music that they produced, and Scott, Scott was really behind a lot of that. And of course, as in recent years, the group, because they got back together. I actually had the privilege to see Scott Weiland a couple years ago at the Rock Legions concert in 2012, right before one of their what would be their last breakup. Of course, STP, as you know, picked up Chester Bennington of Linkin Park. So it's a sad day for the music world, and Scott will be sorely missed. And he just produced great music, and a great music talent has passed on this past week.
For this week's episode of Variety Studio with Evan and Rob. We'll see you next week.